each of the previous charity forum conferences that we have run, we have tried to involve charities that work locally and have asked them to share their experiences. This year I am delighted that Sarah and Jim have agreed to talk to us about a subject very dear to them, the Murray Parish Trust, which supports the paediatric intensive care unit at Southampton University Hospital. It is often quite difficult for charities to obtain public trust and support where they are working in areas involving the public sector. In the case of local government, services and the NHS in particular, there is often a concern from the public that the charities involved in those areas are providing services that should be part of the government's responsibility. We all know, of course, that that is far from the case, and that public resources in many of these areas are very limited, and which requires the support and funding from organisations such as the Murray Parish Trust. Sarah and Jim really do not need any introduction from me. In fact, they've already been signing autographs. I am also available to sign autographs, but Sarah started on the West End stage and has starred in such programmes as Peak Practice, Cutting It, Mistresses, Hearts and Bones, Munro, my favourite W1A, my wife's favourite Atlantis, and Trolleyed. Her film career has seen her playing opposite a number of top Hollywood names, including Kevin Costner, Amy Adams, Bill Paxton, and Deborah Messing. Jim has worked on American television on series such as Chaos, Beautiful People, and the hit show Defiance. In this country, he has starred in Primeval and the hit comedy series Crod Mandoon and The Flaming Sword of Fire. TV roles include Cutting It and Clocking Off, Under the Greenwood Tree, and Sons and Lovers and Death in Paradise. Sarah and Jim will now talk about their work on the Trust and their journey so far.
Thank you for having us, everyone. I'm Sarah, this is Jim, and we are the Murray Parish Trust. And we've been asked to come along today to talk about our charity, why we created it, and the troubles and successes that we've had along the way. So no facts and figures for you today, we're just going to tell our story and hopefully not get in too much trouble with Stephen after we've told it. Jim and I first became involved in the world of charity after our first daughter was born back in 2008. Ella Jane was born with a very serious heart defect, and at the age of 2 days old, she was transferred to the University Hospital Southampton. And at just 3 days old, she underwent her first open heart surgery. After that operation, she was transferred to the paediatric intensive care unit at Southampton, and there, Jim and I were lucky enough to meet a wonderful lady called Rosie Mitchell. Now, Rosie was one of the nurses at PICU and had been there since the 80s when it opened. And she was also the founder of that unit's particular charity, Friends of PICU. During our stay in PICU, Rosie explained to us how most of the equipment being used in the unit, particularly the state-of-the-art equipment, was supplied and funded through charity. Now, that was a real revelation to us. Jim and I always thought that everything was supplied by the NHS. We were blissfully unaware of the lack of funds the NHS had for units like this, units that we thought were essential. In January 2009, we lost EJ. We had had her home since September the year before, so we'd had a wonderful few months to get to know her and to build some wonderful memories with her. And after losing Ella Jane, we both felt an overpowering urge to give something back to the people that had helped us through such a tragic and distressing time. So we first dipped our toe into the sea of fundraising by completing a sponsored walk through the Sapa Valley in Vietnam. There we are with our Friends of PQ t-shirts on. We'd gone to Southeast Asia just after EJ had died to work in a couple of orphanages, and it seemed like the perfect time to do something for the charity that we had now become sponsors for. I think we raised about £8,000, didn't we, on that walk, and we got our first taste of fundraising. When we returned home, we set up a Just Giving page on the Friends of PQ site, and at first, money came in, quite a lot of money came in. But then it stopped, as these things do. I think a tragic event like the death of a child brings with it an outpouring of pity and charity from even the most hard-hearted of people, but that can only be sustained for a certain amount of time. Something else will happen. People's charitable giving goes elsewhere. That's to be expected, I think. The challenge is to continuously reinvent the wheel, as it were. And so, at the start of 2014, Jim and I founded the Murray Parish Trust. We decided we'd like to do something to honour the memory of our daughter, and creating a charity of our own seemed like the perfect fit. It's not a hugely challenging process, setting up a small charity. I mean, there's due diligence to be done by your bank of choice and by the charity commissions, obviously. But once that's done and once all the paperwork is completed, you're off. But it's then that the hard work really begins. Because the idea of running a small charity is very, very different from the reality. Dreams of holding huge events attended by hundreds of people and raising vast amounts of money are very, very quickly swapped with hours spent in front of a computer going through endless data on people and donors who may part with £100. We soon realised that if the Murray Parish Trust was to succeed, we would have to treat it as a full-time job. And as two professional actors, that was our first challenge. We needed to surround ourselves with the right people. So we started small and we hired one lady to come on board and help us with the day-to-day runnings of a small charity, answering the phone, answering emails, helping us with events. I think it was around that time that we did the 3 Peaks Challenge. If you have hip or knee problems, I don't suggest you take that one on. A group of 10 of us completed it, raised a pretty tidy sum in the process, and that was our first deposit in the bank, which was great news for us. And what started off as a part-time position for Our Lady soon turned into a full-time job, and more people were brought on board to help. These people needed paying, and with that came a whole new set of rules. And with that came a whole set of trustees to make sure that we abided by those rules. As you know, the UK was very badly hit last year with 2 major charity scandals, seeing the public's trust and confidence in charities dropping for the first time in over 10 years. It was incredibly important to us that we did things properly, that any money raised would be restricted if that's what the donors had requested. Transparency was of the utmost importance to us. Our first year was a real learning curve. We put way too much emphasis on the events we were going to hold without really thinking them through properly. We had a lot of interest from people wanting to be involved with these events because I think they thought the likelihood of them would be successful. Considering our profile and our contact list. And of course, being in the public eye does help massively. And we're aware of that, and we're very, very grateful for that. But that doesn't automatically mean that people will part with their money. We had some wonderful pieces donated to us from our first event, which was a charity auction at the Groucho in Soho. From artists such as Tracy Emin, Charming Baker, and the Chapman Brothers. It was a very impressive list and should have attracted a huge audience, but no one had heard of our charity. And no one had really heard of the University Hospital Southampton, for that matter. Also, the gods were against us that night. There was a terrible storm and a tube strike. So 3 of the 4 big art dealers that were planning to attend couldn't get to the gallery. There were no taxis on the street because of the rain, and then they couldn't get the tube. There was no tube, so it was all a bit of a nightmare. We made around £30,000 that night, which isn't bad, but we should have tripled that, really. Our summer-sponsored walk on Southampton Common also saw only about 200 people in attendance. We'd hoped and planned for 1,000, but we just couldn't get people to come. It was like getting blood out of a stone. The oddball was our big autumn player, a ball at Kensington Gardens Hotel in London with lots of acts from Britain's Got Talent and a good mix of celebrity guests. It was by far our most successful of the year's events, but it still nearly killed us to get 180 people to come, most of which were friends and family. We made enough money that year to get a custom-made child's gurney for the hospital helicopter, which is about £40,000, and a few other bits and bobs along the way as well. But we couldn't help feeling that we were going about things the wrong way. I think the reason a lot of young charities fold along the way is because of this mismanagement of time. After an initial burst of interest, the reality is that there's an enormous amount of work to do for very little return, and that quickly becomes an unattractive venture. A successful charity needs a strategy, and that's what we didn't have. We needed to start pinpointing individuals that would have a vested interest in what we were trying to achieve. Ours is not an immediately go-to charity, if you like. According to the latest Charity Awareness Monitor, the children and young people sector still remains in the top 3 most popular causes, but it has been pushed into 3rd place by animal welfare, and the gap is widening as the popularity of children's and young people's charities continues to show a steady decline. Also, we were fundraising for the NHS. A lot of people don't want to give to the NHS. They think, I pay my taxes, why should I? The government should provide, it's not my job, which is fair enough. So this was another really big challenge for us, made even more clear when we attended the Battersea Dogs Home Ball in the autumn of 2014, which coincidentally made £150,000 in one night. People were far more eager to give to this than to this. And who can blame them, really? This is immediate, and it's heartbreaking, and it's a little manipulative, some might say.
It's quite cute.
It is quite cute, yeah. It's quite cute. And this is the NHS. It's not hugely appealing on first sight. So we needed to reboot our image. Jim.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, we needed to stop casting the net so wide and pull focus on local trusts and foundations that had given to the NHS before, that had an interest in paediatric medicine and research. We had to manage our time more appropriately and not spend it all on organising huge events, but by selecting small groups of people with an already vested interest in what we were doing. We rebuilt our website and dragged it firmly into the 21st century, made it attractive and easy to navigate. And I can't express how important it is to have a good working website that catches people's attention and keeps it. It's no different from any other business in this regard. We produced a film about the hospital and the work we were doing there, so if people were too lazy to read about us, they could just watch the film. We tried to make it as hard as possible to be ignored. In 2015, we held only 2 events, both of which were small, intimate CEO drinks. Cost of putting on these events was minimal. The outcome of the first was better than we could have ever anticipated, and the outcome of the second put the Murray Parish Trust firmly on the map. The first we hosted at our home in June 2015. We had 10 local CEOs to dinner. We showed our film. We got a couple of the clinicians from the hospital to talk, and then opened up the evening for discussion. Our appeal at the time was the expansion of the present paediatric intensive care unit. The total needed for the 2 new bed spaces was £240,000. That evening saw us raise over £80,000, made out of 2 large donations and 1 partnership. At last, we were getting somewhere. Our second CEO was held in Winchester. We invited 40 businessmen and women from the area for drinks and nibbles. Again, we had our film to show and one clinician from the hospital to come and speak. When said clinician arrived, she was clutching a copy of the Evening Standard. In it was an article about a match funding scheme that the readers of the Standard were doing with the then Chancellor, George Osborne. If the readers could raise £1.5 million for Great Ormond Street, then George would match it. Well, why couldn't he do this for us? Southampton Hospital was desperately in need of a brand new state-of-the-art children's major trauma centre, a centre that would service 9 counties in total. The shell of this centre was already built from past funds, but these funds had been stopped and the build had ground to a halt some years ago. It would cost a whopping £4 million to complete this build, so why shouldn't we ask George for £2 million of that? We did. It seemed a bit punchy, but on cue, our local MP, Steve Brine, walked into the room. I took the bull by the horns and made it my mission that night to corner Steve and plant this idea firmly in his head. The following day, we pushed and pestered until Steve had nowhere else to hide. And he got back to us and he agreed to help. On his suggestion, we made an appointment to see Ian Murray, the chief editor of the Daily Echo, and we agreed to come up with an appeal. We named it Say Yes, George. Imaginative. We partnered with the Southampton Children's Hospital charity, and together with the readers of the Echo, started to lobby our local MPs to agree to take our case to the House of Commons. Social media started to play a bigger part in our process as we tweeted George on a daily basis to say yes. All our local MPs were behind us, and within a couple of months, word got through to George and positive murmurs were beginning to be heard. Well, on the day of the spring budget, Sarah and I had the telly on in the background in the kitchen, and to our utter disbelief, we heard the words Southampton Children's Emergency Department and 2 million steps, or £2 million, shall I say. We'd done it. After a brief but much needed dance of celebration around the breakfast bar, it hit us that we now actually had to raise £2 million. We'd grasped the nettle and our work had only just begun. So far, the Murray Parish Trust had raised over £300,000 for the helicopter gurney and the expansion of the PICU. But now we were about to embark on our biggest ever appeal, so we had to raise the bar again. We launched our new appeal in Parliament on the 7th of June this year, and we called it the 2 Million Steps Campaign. Let's take a look at that day. And for those of you quite rightly concerned, Hammond has agreed to take the baton. It's still coming our way, so don't worry. So to get to that point, we hired a PR person to help us with the publicity, as we needed as much reach as possible. And we also hired a marketing company to help us with our social media campaigns. We had a summer of people tweeting their feet and spreading the word. We did articles in the national papers, the Telegraph, the Times, the Red Tops. We made some appearances on daytime chat shows. Obviously, these privileged and exclusive opportunities were made easier for us for reasons Sarah's said, but the point that I guess I'm trying to make is that we really did put ourselves out there, and for the first time ever, we opened up about our loss. Now, thankfully, due diligence had already been done on us by the government, so we now felt confident to shout out about our cause. The fact that this new emergency department was covering 9 counties across the whole of the south of England made it so much more feasible for us to reach out on a national scale. And of course, if we succeed in building this emergency department, the chances of us getting more funding to complete the brand new children's hospital will be much higher. So, this is our latest appeal, a brand new pediatric ED. Here is a bird's eye view. Now, this is the assessment area at present in the existing emergency department. This will be the new acute assessment area. This is the current observed play area, a little bit pokey. This will be the new improved play area, very stylish, roomy. This is the old waiting room, or the existing waiting room. This will be the new waiting room. And so on and so forth. It will be an incredible state-of-the-art department and will help save the lives of thousands of children every year. It's all very exciting. Well, we've come a long way since our walk through the Sapper Valley. We've learned lots of lessons, the most important of which are as follows. Surround your charity with great trustees. Try and include at least one banker, one lawyer, and one accountant in your deck, if you possibly can. And this room is full of them. Use your time wisely. Mismanagement of time is a killer for any charity. Reinvent yourself. Find ways to reignite interest in your charity at least every 6 months if you can. Invest in a great website. People's focus is short, so you need to hook them in immediately. Events. Think them through carefully, not just financial P&L, but will it be worth the time and energy that you put into it? Make your events different, make them exciting. People are so over standing in a drafty, soulless convention room, nursing a warm Pinot Grigio and a vol au vent. If you want their money, you've got to give them something great in return. Community. Reach out to your community through your local paper. Create appeals and ask for support. Pinpoint trusts, foundations, and individuals that have a connection to your cause. And look after your major donors. Don't just forget them once the check is cleared. If they've given once and you take care of them, they may well give again. Visuals. Make some sort of visual appeal if you can. Nowadays, people are so much more likely to watch than they are to read. And on that note, here is our most recent film. Enjoy. The Murray Parish Trust was founded to keep our daughter's memory alive.
And in doing so, we hope to save many other young lives.